He returned from Afghanistan without both legs, his body marked by scars that no uniform could hide, and his soul carrying the weight of decisions he never had to make. But what this soldier built after that day of explosion, pain, and darkness will make you question everything you ever thought impossible. Have you ever stopped to think about the true price of war? I'm not talking about numbers in the news or cold statistics in government reports. I'm talking about real men and women with families, dreams, and a whole life ahead of them, who paid with their own blood for strategies devised in air-conditioned rooms thousands of kilometers from the battlefield. Stay with me until the end, because what you're about to discover isn't just about war. It's about the human capacity to rise from the ashes, even when all seems lost. It's about transformation, purpose, and a strength most of us don't even imagine we have until we're tested to the limit. Have you ever wondered what it would be like to wake up in a military hospital, look down, and realize that part of you is simply no longer there? What would it be like to hear doctors talking in technical terms about prosthetics, rehabilitation, and a new normal, while your mind is still stuck in that moment? The deafening roar of the explosion, the screams of your comrades, the feeling that your life ended before you even turned 25. These are the stories that rarely make the news. When the cameras turn off and the audience goes home, when the politicians finish their patriotic speeches and the flags stop waving, what remains? What remains are soldiers trying to relearn how to walk, to sleep without nightmares, to look in the mirror and recognize the person they have become. But here's the part that will surprise you. Some of these warriors, who lost more than most of us can imagine, found something deep within that pain, something powerful. Something that transformed them not only into survivors, but into living examples that the end can be just the beginning of an even more extraordinary story. What you are about to discover may completely change your perspective on starting over, because when you meet these men and women, when you understand what they went through and above all, what they became afterward, you will realize that your own battles, however difficult they may be, carry within them the same possibility of rebirth. We are talking about soldiers who returned home destroyed, physically and emotionally devastated, facing an enemy that no military training prepared them to fight. Their own minds, their own limitations, their own fear of never being who they were before. And you know what's most impressive? They won. Not in the way they planned, not following the script they imagined for their lives, but in an even more powerful way. Because these transformations didn't happen despite the pain, they happened through it. Have you ever been through this? Have you ever felt like you lost something so important that it would be impossible to continue? Then you need to know these stories. You need to understand how decisions made in Washington offices changed lives forever in the mountains of Afghanistan, and how these same soldiers picked up the pieces of what was left and built something that no one imagined possible. Get ready, because the journey that begins now is not easy to watch, but I guarantee it's worth every second, and what you'll feel at the end. Get ready, because the journey that begins now isn't easy to watch, but I guarantee it's worth every second, and what you'll feel at the end might be exactly the boost you or someone you love needs to believe that it's possible to start over. Before we continue, I want to make a genuine request to you who are here with me now. If this topic resonates with you, if you have faced your own battles or know someone who is struggling with visible or invisible scars, leave a comment below about what has touched you the most so far. Tell us, what was the most difficult battle you have ever faced in your life? Because look, this space isn't just mine, it's ours. It's a community of people who believe that real stories have the power to transform real lives. And your comment could be exactly what someone else needs to read today to not give up. And if you feel this content deserves to reach more people, leave a sincere like. Your like isn't just a number to me, it's the algorithm understanding that stories like these of rebirth and true overcoming need to be seen. Each like is a way of saying, yes, this type of content matters, and it needs to reach those who need to hear it now. Your participation here is what makes this channel grow and reach more people with this type of message. People who may be at the lowest point in their lives and need a reminder that the story doesn't end in pain. And if you haven't subscribed to the channel yet, now's the time. Because if you've made it this far, if these words are resonating with you, then you're part of this tribe, a tribe that isn't afraid to look at difficult stories, that doesn't shy away from the raw truth, but also chooses to believe in the extraordinary power of the human spirit. Click that subscribe button and activate the bell, because every week I bring you stories that will move you, that will make you feel, think, and above all, believe that nothing is permanent when there's a will to transform. Now, returning to where we left off, you need to understand the full context of what these soldiers faced, because it wasn't just the visible war, the one on the battlefields and with the explosions. It was a war that began much earlier, with questionable strategic decisions, changes to the rules of combat that unnecessarily put lives at risk, orders that made sense on maps but destroyed realities on the ground. In this video, you will meet soldiers who lost everything due to political decisions made thousands of kilometers from the battlefield, in air-conditioned meeting rooms where generals and politicians moved pieces on a chessboard that had human lives as its cost. And more importantly, you will discover how these men and women took this devastating trauma and transformed it into purpose, into a mission, into a reason to keep breathing when everything inside them screamed to give up. The hidden truth about Afghanistan isn't just in the official numbers, though they're brutal enough. 2,456 American soldiers died in that arid and unforgiving territory. More than 20,000 returned home wounded, many with injuries that would change their lives forever. But the numbers don't tell the whole story. They don't show the 23-year-old sergeant who lost both legs because the route he was ordered to patrol had already been identified as dangerous 3 weeks earlier, but no one made the decision to change the route. They don't show the specialist who returned physically intact, but with a mind so shattered that he could no longer sleep without seeing the faces of the friends who didn't come back. These cold figures don't capture the real impact, the journey of pain that began the moment these warriors set foot on American soil and realized that the war within them was only beginning. Changes in the rules of engagement, hasty withdrawals without proper planning, strategies that prioritize political appearances over tactical effectiveness. All of this created a literal and figurative minefield for the soldiers who were simply trying to fulfill their mission and return home alive. How many times have you made difficult decisions in your life? Now imagine that the consequences of your decisions don't depend on you, but on people who have never been where you are, who have never felt the scorching heat of the Afghan desert, who have never had to look a comrade in the eye and promise to bring him back to his family. That is the reality these soldiers lived every day. Now, I want to delve even deeper into this subject and introduce you to a real person. Let's call him Marcus, a veteran from Austin, Texas, who enlisted in the Army at 19 with eyes full of purpose and a chest puffed out with patriotism. Marcus was no different from thousands of other young Americans who believed they were serving something greater than themselves. He underwent intense training, developed stronger bonds with his platoon mates than with any friend he had in civilian life, and was deployed to Afghanistan in 2012, right in the middle of one of the most intense phases of the conflict. For months, Marcus patrolled the same dusty roads, entered the same villages, searched for the same signs of insurgents. The routine was exhausting, but he was alive, he was doing his part. He was counting the days until he could return home and embrace his mother, his father, and the girlfriend who awaited him with a loyalty he wasn't sure he deserved. But one afternoon in November, everything changed. Marcus was leading his team on a routine patrol when the world literally exploded beneath him. An improvised explosive device, an IED planted in the road, detonated with a force that transformed that patch of land into instant hell. The noise was deafening, but Marcus barely registered it because the pain that followed consumed every thought, every sense, every shred of consciousness he still had. He remembers screaming, trying to move and realizing something was terribly wrong, seeing blood, so much blood, too much blood to be real. His teammates rushed to help him, applied tourniquets, shouted on the radio for urgent medical evacuation, did everything they could while Marcus floated between consciousness and darkness, between reality and a nightmare he couldn't wake up from. When Marcus finally opened his eyes in a military hospital in Germany days later, the first thing he tried to do was move his toes. Nothing happened. He tried again, concentrating every ounce of willpower he had on that simple movement he had made millions of times in his life without thinking. Nothing. And then came the truth. Delivered by a nurse with kind eyes and a voice trained to deliver bad news. He had lost both legs below the knee. The explosion had taken away parts of his body he would never see again, never feel again, never use again in the way he always had. 22 years old, and his life as he knew it had ended in a fraction of a second because of a bomb planted by someone he had knew. Seen in a war he was beginning to question, serving decisions made by people who would never put their own children in the same situation. The despair Marcus felt in those first few days is beyond words. It wasn't just the physical pain, although that was almost unbearable. It was the pain of looking to the future and seeing nothing but limitations. It was thinking of his girlfriend and imagining she would never look at him the same way again. It was remembering all the things he loved to do, running, playing basketball, dancing at parties, and realizing that all of that had been stolen from him. The doctors spoke of state-of-the-art prosthetics, rehabilitation, adapting to the new reality. But Marcus could barely process these words because he was still stuck in that moment on the road, in that second when everything exploded, on that cruel dividing line between before and after. The weeks turned into months of brutal physiotherapy, of learning to balance on prosthetics that felt like strange pieces of metal attached to what remained of his legs, of falling and getting up and falling again until every muscle in his body screamed in exhaustion. But worse than the physical pain was the emotional pain that came in waves, especially at night when he was alone with his thoughts. Marcus found himself thinking about the companions who had died, wondering why he had survived when others, better than him, were not so lucky. He wondered what the purpose was of continuing to live like this. Limited, dependent, broken. Depression settled in like a heavy shadow that obscured any ray of hope that tried to penetrate. But then something happened that Marcus didn't expect. During a particularly difficult physical therapy session, he met another veteran, an older man named James, who had lost a leg in Iraq years before. James didn't offer empty words of comfort or cheap motivational cliches. Instead, he simply looked at Marcus and said something that pierced through all the layers of self-pity. You can spend the rest of your life lamenting what you've lost, or you can discover what you still have. The choice is yours, every day, every hour. That simple phrase, spoken by someone who truly understood, who had been in the same dark hole and had found a way out, planted a seed in Marcus's mind. It wasn't an instant transformation. Marcus didn't wake up the next day, healed and motivated. But that conversation initiated a gradual shift in his mindset. He began paying attention to other veterans at the rehabilitation center, stories of people who had lost more than he had, and yet had found ways to live full, meaningful, powerful lives. He began to realize that the explosion had taken his legs, but it hadn't taken his voice, his mind, his ability to make a difference. And that's when Marcus made a conscious, deliberate decision that would change the course of his life. He wouldn't be defined by what he had lost, but by what he chose to build with what remained. Marcus began studying, learning everything he could about prosthetics, veterans' rights, and the challenges wounded soldiers faced when trying to reintegrate into civilian society. He discovered that his journey of pain had equipped him with a unique perspective, a deep empathy that he could use to help others who were where he had been. He began volunteering in veterans' hospitals, talking to newly arrived soldiers who were facing their own moments of despair, offering not empty advice, but living proof that it was possible to be reborn even after losing so much. And the more he focused on helping others, the more he discovered he was healing himself in the process. Today, Marcus not only walks again, he runs marathons with his prosthetics, becoming a living symbol of resilience for his community in Austin. He founded a non-profit organization that helps injured veterans access resources, find purpose, and rebuild lives after trauma. But if you ask him what the real turning point was, he'll tell you it was the moment he stopped asking, "Why me?" and started asking, "What can this be used for?" That's when he transformed the victim back into a warrior, only this time fighting a different battle, one he could actually win. Now, this isn't the only story that needs to be told, because not all war wounds are visible. Not every soldier returns home missing pieces of their body. Some return seemingly intact, but carrying unseen internal battles, psychological wars that are just as devastating as any physical injury. This is where I want to introduce you to another soldier. Let's call him David, a veteran from Seattle, Washington, who survived a brutal ambush in Kandahar that killed 3 of his best friends. David was on a reconnaissance mission when his convoy was attacked by insurgents hiding in the mountains. The firefight lasted what seemed like an eternity, bullets ricocheting off the metal of the vehicles, explosions shaking the ground, cries of pain and confused orders mixing in absolute chaos. David fought, fired back, did everything his training taught him to do, and when the shooting finally stopped, when silence descended on that blood-stained road, David was alive. But 3 of the men with whom he had shared meals, jokes, dreams about the future were not. He had seen one of them die in his arms, had held another's hand as life slipped from his eyes, had been unable to reach the 3rd who was trapped in the burning wreckage of a vehicle. David returned home without a scratch on his body, but completely destroyed inside. He began having nightmares every night, reliving that day in every possible way, imagining scenarios where he had done something different, something that could have saved his friends. During the day, he jumped at any loud noise, avoided crowds, and isolated himself from anyone who tried to get close. His family didn't understand why he had changed so much, why the son, brother, husband, who had left full of life, had returned as a distant and cold shadow. David couldn't explain it because he himself didn't fully understand. He only knew that the world no longer made sense, that he no longer fit in anywhere, that the guilt of being alive when his friends were dead consumed him like an acid that corroded everything from the inside out. He tried to drown the pain with alcohol, then with medication, anything that could silence the screams in his head, that could make him sleep without seeing those faces, without hearing those sounds. His wife tried to help, begged him to seek therapy, to talk to someone, to let her into the private hell he was living. But David pushed everyone away, convinced that no one could understand, that he was beyond saving. There were nights when he sat alone, a gun in his hand, seriously considering ending it all, joining the friends he had failed to protect. Post-traumatic stress disorder is not a weakness. It is a real wound, as real as any physical injury, but infinitely more difficult to treat because it doesn't show up on X-rays, it can't be stitched or bandaged, it doesn't have a clear recovery protocol. David hit rock bottom when his wife finally had to leave, taking with her their young daughter, whom he barely recognized because he was always lost inside his own head. He lost his job, lost contact with friends, lost any sense of who he was before the war. He was living in a tiny apartment, alone, sinking deeper and deeper into a hole that seemed to have no way out. And it was, at this point, when he literally had nothing left to lose, that something changed. One day, David was wandering aimlessly through the city when he passed an animal shelter. On impulse, he went in, not because he had any plans to adopt an animal, but because it was a place to be that wasn't his empty, suffocating apartment. Inside, he met a dog, a German shepherd rescued from abuse, who was just as traumatized as David. The animal trembled, avoided strangers, and its eyes were filled with the same kind of fear and pain that David saw in the mirror every day. And something about that encounter, that mutual recognition of trauma, touched David in a way that no amount of therapy had managed to. He adopted the dog that day, took it home, and for the first time in years, had something beyond himself to care for, a responsibility not tied to war, guilt, or the past. Caring for that animal began to create a routine in David's chaotic life. He needed to wake up to feed the dog. He needed to take it for walks. He needed to be present in a way he hadn't been able to be for anyone, not even himself. And slowly, through this simple but powerful purpose, David began to feel small cracks in the armor of depression that imprisoned him. He started looking for support groups for veterans, not because he believed it would work, but because someone in one of those groups mentioned animal therapy, and he wanted to better understand that connection he was feeling. In the groups, David found other men and women who carried the same kind of invisible wounds, who understood the nightmares, the survivor's guilt, the feeling of being trapped between two worlds. He began to speak, timidly and painfully at first, about what had happened in Kandahar, about the friends he had lost, about the impossibility of continuing to live with that weight. And he discovered that putting words to the trauma, sharing it with people who truly understood, began to diminish its power over him. It didn't disappear, it probably never will completely, but it became something he could carry instead of something that dragged him down. David became increasingly involved with animal-assisted therapy programs for veterans with PTSD. He volunteered, then became a coordinator, and finally founded his own initiative that connected traumatized soldiers with rescued dogs who also needed healing. The brilliance of it lay in the reciprocity. The veterans healed the dogs, and the dogs healed the veterans, creating a cycle of purpose and connection that filled the void the war had left. Today, David's program has helped hundreds of veterans find their way back to life, and he himself has rebuilt his relationship with his daughter, found a new partner who loves him for the man he became through the fight, and wakes up every day with a sense of mission that the war never could give him. So now, I want you to stop and think about what these two stories have in common. Marcus and David lost different things, faced different battles, but both arrived at the same dark abyss where giving up seemed like the only option. And both found a way out, not by returning to who they were before, because that was impossible, but by becoming someone new, someone forged by pain but not defined by it. There is a pattern in true transformations, and understanding that pattern can be the difference between being stuck in trauma and using trauma as fuel for growth. The first key element is community. Neither of them succeeded alone. Marcus needed James to plant that seed of possibility. David needed support groups to feel he wasn't isolated in his pain. The idea that we are self-sufficient islands is a dangerous lie. Human beings are social creatures, and healing happens in connection, not in isolation. When you're at rock bottom, when everything seems lost, the presence of someone who has been there and come out on the other side becomes a beacon showing that there is another way. The second element is a purpose greater than yourself. Both Marcus and David discovered that focusing exclusively on their own pain only amplified the suffering. It was when they began using their experiences to help others that the real transformation began. There is something profoundly healing, about transforming your greatest trauma into the source of your greatest contribution. Not because it erases the pain, but because it gives it meaning, transforming a random and meaningless wound into part of a journey that can truly make a difference. The third element is accepting help. Both had to swallow their pride, admit they couldn't do it alone, accept that they needed therapy, support groups, prosthetics, medication, resources they wouldn't be ashamed to use. Our culture glorifies self-sufficiency to the point of making it seem like asking for help is a weakness. But the truth is exactly the opposite. Recognizing that you need support and having the courage to seek it is one of the strongest things you can do. And the fourth element is disciplined routine. Transformation doesn't happen in a magical moment of enlightenment. It happens in small, repeated choices, day after day, even when you don't feel like it, especially when you don't feel like it. Marcus had to show up for physical therapy every day, even when every fiber of his being screamed to give up. David had to wake up and take care of the dog even on days when he could barely get out of bed. These small acts of discipline, repeated until they become habits, are the bricks that build the path back to life. Now I want to delve even deeper into this subject and tell you one last story, the most powerful of all. Because if Marcus and David showed you that rebirth is possible, this next person will show you that there is no limit to how far you can go, even after losing everything. Let's call her Sarah, a veteran from Denver, Colorado, who returned from Afghanistan with devastating physical injuries and discovered, upon arriving home, that her husband had left her, taking their 2 young children and emptying their bank account. In a single week, Sarah lost her mobility, her family, her financial stability, and any semblance of a predictable future. She spent months in hospitals, alone, without visitors, without a support system, facing painful surgeries and brutal rehabilitation while simultaneously processing abandonment and betrayal. Doctors were pessimistic about her recovery, lawyers were ruthless about her chances of custody, and the whole world seemed to be conspiring to keep her down. Sarah had serious suicidal thoughts, even planning how she would do it, when she would do it, writing farewell letters that were never sent. By every visible metric, she was completely broken beyond repair. But Sarah didn't die. She woke up one day after a particularly dark night and made a decision she herself can't fully explain. She decided that if she was going to continue living, then she would live in a way that honored everything she had lost, that proved to herself and to the world that the end wasn't the end. She started small, with goals as basic as being able to dress herself, being able to cross the hospital corridor without help. Each small victory became evidence that perhaps, just perhaps, bigger things were possible. Sarah discovered she had a talent for speaking, for articulating the experience of trauma in a way that resonated with others. She began telling her story at small veterans events, then at larger conferences, then on national programs. Her raw vulnerability and refusal to sugarcoat the pain touched people in a way that polished motivational speeches never could. She used this platform to advocate for changes in veterans' support policies, fought in court for the right to see her children, and slowly began to rebuild a life that was completely different from what she had planned, but profoundly meaningful in ways she had never imagined. Today, Sarah has not only regained joint custody of her children, she has also become a leading voice in the veterans' rights movement, competed in Paralympic sports breaking national records, written a best-selling book, and founded an organization that has helped thousands of female veterans navigate the unique challenges they face. When you look at where she was and where she is now, the distance is so vast that it seems impossible that it's the same person. And in many ways, it's not. The Sarah of today was forged in the furnace of unimaginable pain, but she emerged from that fire not broken, but refined, not diminished, but amplified in power and purpose. What these three stories, Marcus, David, and Sarah, teach us is something fundamental about human nature and true transformation. These men and women did not choose what happened to them in Afghanistan. They did not ask to be hurt, traumatized, abandoned. They were placed in impossible situations by decisions that people in positions of power made far from real danger, and they paid prices that those people will never pay. But here is the powerful and liberating truth. They chose who they would become afterward. They chose, in a moment of conscious decision, that tragedy would not be the end of the story, but the means, the turning point that would lead to something that no one, including themselves, could have foreseen. And here's where this connects to you, to your life, to the battles you're facing right now. Maybe you didn't go to Afghanistan. Maybe you never wore a military uniform or held a gun. But you fought your own wars, didn't you? You had your own moments where the ground disappeared from beneath your feet, where everything you thought was solid and certain simply evaporated, where you were forced to rebuild from scratch without choosing to be in that position. The question isn't why it happened to you, because that question rarely has a satisfactory answer and only keeps you stuck in the role of victim. The real question, the only one that matters, is who will you become now? What will you build with the pieces that remain? How will you transform your greatest wound into the source of your greatest strength? I'm not saying it's easy. Marcus, David, and Sarah would tell you it was the hardest thing they've ever done, that there were days when giving up seemed not only easier, but the only logical option. But they would also tell you that on the other side of that choice, that daily decision to keep going, to fight, to transform, there is a version of you that is stronger, wiser, more compassionate, more powerful than you could ever have become without going through the fire. Pain is not wasted when you transform it into purpose. Trauma is not definitive when you decide it will be the catalyst, not the end. Comment below. I choose to be reborn. If these stories touched something within you, if you are on your own journey of transformation, write these words, because when you declare it publicly, when you put it into words, you are taking the first conscious act of transforming victim into warrior. Now I want to go even deeper into this subject and leave a final reflection with you who had the courage to get this far with me. If you watched this video until the end, you're not an ordinary person. Seriously. Most people look away when the subject is real pain, true trauma, transformation that requires blood, sweat, and tears. But you stayed. You listened to the stories of Marcus, David, and Sarah. You understood that rebirth isn't a magical event. It's a daily, sometimes hourly, choice to keep building even when everything inside you screams to give up. And if these stories resonated with you, if you felt that tightness in your chest, that realization that you too are in your own battle, then I want to extend a genuine invitation to you. Subscribe to the channel here, because every week I bring you stories like this, real stories of real people who faced the impossible and came out the other side transformed. It's not superficial content. It's not cheap motivation that lasts 5 minutes. It's material that moves you, that disturbs you, that plants seeds of possibility in places in your life where you thought nothing else could grow. And comment below, I'm with you until the end. I want to know who actually watched, who truly absorbed this message, who is committed to their own transformation. Your comments aren't just interaction for the algorithm. They are living proof of a community of people who aren't afraid to face their pain head-on and transform it into something greater. If this conversation resonated with you, please leave a sincere like. Not out of obligation, but because you recognize the value of what we share here. Because you want this type of content to reach more people who need to hear that rebirth is possible, that the end is never truly the end when you decide to continue writing the story. And look, there's a video over here that perfectly complements everything we've talked about today. Click and continue with me there, because the journey doesn't end here. There's so much more to explore about transformation, about strength you didn't even know you had, about possibilities waiting on the other side of fear. See you there.